Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
And welcome back, everybody. I'm thinking that this has crossed your mind before. When you're on a website and you're signing up for something and you tick the little box at the end, the disclaimer, the waiver. And a lot of us don't even read it. We just say, okay, click and move on. What impact does that have on your rights legally? We're going to talk with an expert on that today, surrounding a case that's making headlines involving a large entertainment entity. Curious to see where we're going to go with this and his thoughts on it. He is a very successful, tenacious advocate for clients and their interests, and he's demonstrated significant number of awards and millions of dollars recovered for his clients as a personal injury and trial lawyer. He is Paul Bekman, joining us on the program today. Hey, Paul, how you doing?
Doing fine, Steve. How are you?
Very well. By the way, if you want to reach out to us, 631-319-6275 or instant feedback, steve@gmail.com. I have to believe there'll be some thoughts on this case involving Disney. Where do we begin?
Well, we begin with what happened to Dr. Amy Tang, who, with her husband, planned a trip to Disney World, like many of us have done with our children, with our grandchildren. And they flew down to Disney World. And when they went out to eat, Amy, who is a physician, talked to the waiter who was taking care of them and said, look, I have an allergy, a food allergy. The allergy is to dairy and nuts. And I absolutely cannot have anything that in any way, shape, or form deals with that. He says, look, don't worry about it. We can make your meal allergy free, not to worry. And this was said to her multiple times because, of course, she's careful. She wanted to use due diligence. She wanted to make sure she was protected. So the food is served. Within a very few minutes, she starts to feel poorly. She loses consciousness. She's transported to the hospital emergently. And within 1 hour, she's dead. Mm. Her body, as happens many times, is taken to the medical examiner. And the medical examiner does a thorough autopsy because they have jurisdiction in cases of questionable death. And they find out that she had what is called an anaphylactic reaction to the food and nuts that were in the food that she was served. Mm. So in a case where you are suing for negligence, you have to show, one, a duty. Disney had a duty. Two, breach of duty. Here, there was a clear breach of that duty to provide allergy-free food, no dairy, no nuts. Then you have the issue of what's called proximate cause. What was the cause of her death? Confirmed unilaterally by a medical examiner, independent person whose job it is to determine causes of death. And this was caused by an anaphylactic reaction caused by them serving her dairy and nuts, sure. Confirmed in the autopsy. So what happened was her husband, devastated, looked into hiring a lawyer to investigate the issue of the responsibility of Disney for this terrible tragedy. And the lawyer contacted Disney, and the lawyer said, I'm filing a lawsuit against Disney for negligence in what they did here and in resulting in the death of my wife. And the people from Disney said, hold on a minute. You can't sue us. He said, well, what do you mean can't sue you? Well, in your consumer obligation agreement coming to Disney World to stay, there's a waiver. And you release us from any negligence caused in any way, shape, or form that may result in an injury to you or to your wife or to your children, whoever is coming with you. And they're dumbfounded. How can that possibly be? You then would have all of the rights taken away from you, and you may be limited to, at best, going through what's called an arbitration, which is a proceeding before a neutral arbitrator, no jury, who would then decide, A, on the validity of the waiver and the fact that you would never get a trial of your peers for what happened here. Now, you can imagine when this took place and it hit the public domain, it was all over.
Sure.
And it's been reported in virtually all the newspapers in the country. And there was tremendous pressure on Disney to revoke that waiver and permit the case to go to court, which they did. What is pending now. But it raises the issue for all of us who travel, who take our children, our grandchildren, friends, spouses, that you have to be careful with what you are given. In Disney, they have this basically irrevocable consumer obligation agreement, which says you waive your rights. You have to look at what you are seeing here and what you are doing. When you go out to an amusement park and you get on a ride and the ride for some reason malfunctions, if you look at the ticket that you took, you'll see that there is a waiver. If you rent equipment, like you want to go out kayaking, or you want to go on the water and you're renting a kayak, or you're renting a surfboard, or whatever, you will see that there are waivers that you have to sign before you're allowed to do it. Now, these are, quite frankly, totally biased, totally take away the rights of individuals. And what's happened really around the country is a lot of states, through their legislature, have passed laws to revoke and annul any such agreements. For example, here where I am in Maryland, that happened just this session of the legislature. And it was literally a unanimous kind of a thing when people were explained what this is and what it does. It's taking away your rights when you're negligent. So that, I think, is going to end up spreading around the country, and you'll see more and more states going to annul and revoke any such agreement.
So many questions here. First off, a lot of these companies have our hands tied because unless you sign the agreement, and challenging now in that it's electronic agreement, so it's just a check of a box and you authorize that check of a box and whatever looks like your signature to be your legal representation. But what if I want to go to Disney, but I don't want to sign that? I can't go. And by the way, I don't know if this is the same case. I don't know if my information is accurate. Somebody told me that they signed up for Disney Plus TV and the clause was in that. Now, I don't know if it's the same case, but I heard about a case recently. Somebody told me about it, so it's secondhand. But that's where that fine print, if you will, was located. It wasn't even for a trip to Disney, but it releases Disney of everything for whatever you sign up for Disney connected, i.e. their programming.
You're right, Stephen. That's happening all over, and it's happening all over the country. And I think that the, advised consumer, like all of us, would want to know where we're going and what the laws are in that state. I think what's going to end up happening here is that this law is going to end up being passed in Florida. There was tremendous awareness, tremendous concern about going someplace where you did nothing wrong and something was done wrong to you or to your family or to your friend, and they were injured severely, or God forbid, they were die, as what happened to Amy. So you've got to be aware
Sure.
and you've got to pay attention to that. And it may be that you will decline. So in your particular state or where you're going, what the law is as it relates to the releases, because they can be binding and you can lose your rights. So here's a message to the country. This is not a proper, reasonable law. A person should be held liable for negligent acts and not have a fence or a barrier or some type of brick conveyance that would prevent you from suing and not permitting you to get into court to get justice.
So back in the day, my mom always used to say, if you have to sign something, add to it, subject to an attorney's approval. Right away.
Well,
That's your
I think
relief.
they're going to send you out the door and say, well, go ahead and get your attorney's approval. It's not going to change what I've done.
Well, in the situations where, you're online and there's a form and you're filling it out, again, they've made it so simple, but simple in their favor because you're not even signing half the time. You're just checking off a box. But just go with me on this. If there is a box for you to sign where you can sign your signature, what about if you signed something and then wrote subject to attorney's approval? Would that release you from any challenges?
I don't think so. I think that what
Yeah,
you
I
would
was all
have,
excited there, by the way, Paul.
yeah, yes, I think that what you need to do in those circumstances is to say to the person providing it, I have read your, provisions here,
Mhm.
and the fact that I would release you from any liability if you're negligent, I am going to erase, I'm going to write it over, I'm going to write lines through it, I'm going to initial it, and otherwise I'm not coming. I'm
Mhm.
not going. The pressure has got to be put on these individuals who are doing it. And there may be some places, for example, and when a law is passed by the legislature, not everybody in that state knows that that law has been passed, and particularly the providers.
Sure.
So you should be aware of, if it's your state, what's the state law? If you're going to another state, what's the law there? And make sure you are protected. It's a simple, common thing to do, and people should be aware of it.
Hmm. I have a question related. First, we're going to go to a call. Hi, can you hear us? You said arbitrator. You said arbitrator would be involved in this. Is that like a mediator?
It's different. There's a difference between a mediator and an arbitrator. When you have a mediator, the function of the mediator is to bring the parties together. Put one party in one room, put another party in another room, go back and forth and resolve the issue. It's voluntary. Arbitration is voluntary in the sense that you agree to arbitration, but in this particular case, their provision here said you're mandatorily going to have an arbitrator, which means a person we're going to select, not you, we're going to select the arbitrator, and that arbitrator is going to hear what you have to say and what the other side has to say, and the arbitrator will make a judgment just like it's a judge alone, no
Hmm.
jury,
Hmm.
hired by the person who has written the law that says, you can't sue me.
Interesting. And we're going to go to a call now, but what's the arbitrator's credentials? Is it like a retired judge? Is it a judge?
It can be that, or it can be a lawyer. It could be somebody who works for Disney World. You may be bound by whoever they pick. And I can assure you, it's not going to be, Judge Judy.
Wow. Let's go to Oakland. Hi, can you hear us?
Hey, how you doing?
Very well. Who's this?
My name is Mike.
Hey, Mike. We have attorney Paul Bekman with us. Got a question?
Oh, yes, I do actually. I have a situation that I just got into, and I just wanted to maybe someone can offer me some clarification on what I should be expecting here. I was at a family party, and my cousin needed a ride. Nobody was really in condition to give him a ride, so I called a ride share app. We're going to call it.
Okay.
Not going to specifically say which one, obviously, but I used the ride share app but it was my account for my cousin. He gets in the car pulls away, they get hit by a car. So now you have my rideshare app. My cousin's in the car. He gets hit by an additional car. He breaks a bone in his wrist. I don't know what the bone is called. There's a case here, but there's a lot of confusion over who's responsible, who's showing negligence. And I just wanted to ask Mr. Bekman what he thought of a situation like that.
I don't think you're responsible, other than providing a ride. You're not guaranteeing that that person is not going to be negligent. So the issue is going to be between the vehicle that is provided, their carrier, and the driver of the other vehicle. It's simple as that. And whoever is determined to be at fault would bear the responsibility. Your guest was not responsible. He didn't do anything wrong. He wasn't contributorily negligent. He wasn't driving. It's between the two drivers. I think you're in the clear.
I wasn't worried specifically for me. I was more worried specifically, is there a way that they could void out that he wasn't the passenger due to it being my rideshare app that booked the ride and I wasn't present?
They took it, and they took him, and I'm sure that when it was over, they were going to collect their fee, albeit if you provided it. That's all the more reason why, you buy a ticket for somebody to go on a plane and the plane crashes. That's not your fault, nor is this accident your fault. And I'm calling it an accident, but it's really an incident. It's a crash. It's a collision. And it's an accident in the sense that two people were involved, but one of them is responsible.
Between the drivers?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Thank you. Appreciate you calling up. Wow. Just goes to demonstrate how deep this goes when it comes to these cases. There's so many different finite details, and that's what your team does, collects all that information, right?
That's absolutely true. You have to know, what does the agreement say if there is an agreement? And a lot of times people try to use it to bring in another party, like this gentleman as a party, but he didn't do anything wrong. Right. He did what any reasonable person would do, whether you hire Lyft, or anybody else, Uber, they're going to be responsible for what they do on the road, as is you or me or anybody else.
I know some people that drive for one of those services, and he told me that friends occasionally ask him, "Hey, you know what? Why don't you forget about the app? Just pick me up. I'll pay you, and you'll make more money." And while it looks attractive, he says, "No, I'm not going to do that," because when he drives for Lyft or Uber, they pick up the insurance. So it behooves him to make sure that he's driving somebody under their jurisdiction. Otherwise, his insurance company might be on the hook, and that could be more challenging.
Yeah, because one of the unusual things about this is that this guest who was taken by the caller, he himself may have a driver's license on a vehicle that would cover him in the event that he was injured in somebody else's vehicle. It's called uninsured motorist coverage. It's really not uninsured. It's underinsured. If the carrier does not have enough insurance, his insurance will step in. It's no fault. You pay for it, and it will provide additional coverage in the event of a serious injury. And that's what everybody should have. And take a look at your UIM, uninsured motorist, misnomer. It's also underinsurance to protect you in the event that you're hit in somebody else's vehicle. That can come into play. And sometimes people have very substantial coverage. I'm not talking about 100,000 or 500,000. I'm talking about 1 million or 2 or 3. And that is some protection that you can get. And it isn't all that expensive to obtain.
What are the guidelines while we're talking about driving and insurance? Somebody else drives your car. Who's insured?
Well, if it's your car, you are insuring that vehicle as the owner. And you can be held responsible if you delegate that vehicle to somebody else. So the vehicle itself has insurance because you provide the insurance, and that insurance is going to come to bear as the owner. And, we get into situations, Steve, like the person that you're loaning the car to drive, you know, is not really a good driver, where they've had problems like driving while impaired or driving while intoxicated or had their license suspended. And that can get you into what's called negligent entrustment, where you would be held liable for entrusting that vehicle to somebody who was not competent to drive it based upon their prior experience. Happens a lot.
All right. That being said, what if you have a teenager just got a learner's permit? Obviously, they don't have a lot of experience driving. They got to learn somewhere. What do we do there?
So you got to see what the requirements of the state are, because a lot of times they require an adult to be with them
Yes.
up to a certain age.
I'm sorry.
So
Let me clarify. Yes, I'm referring to the learner's permit where somebody is, say, 16. That requires an adult driver to be in the vehicle. However, the person with the learner's permit, and they could have been, driving for a very short period of time, they're operating the vehicle.
yeah, and that can create a problem for you, particularly if the person is inexperienced and they end up having an event where I don't know what to do. What do I have to do? And all of a sudden, boom, there's a collision, or they're bending down to pick something up on the floor and they hit something. In those occasions, I think what you'll find is that the person who owns the vehicle will be joined and want to be found out what they've done to train this person, in addition to them getting a certification at 16. How many hours did you spend with him? What did you do for him? How did he do? Were there any problems? Did he fail his test more than one time? And you have to just gauge the circumstances, and different people have different reactions to that. But it's always an issue of bringing in another person with, quote unquote, the deep pockets, and not the teenager who has nothing.
Let's go to Searsport, Maine. Hi, who's this? Hello, can you hear us? I guess not. What's going on with our phone today? I guess I clicked off the box, the waiver there, and something's going on. I don't know. Let's go back for a second to waivers. When you're signing up for something, how do you get around it when it's electronic? And if you want to sign up for a service, no matter what it is, and you click it, now you don't even have a chance to state your case, or in the case of, let's say it's Disney, to call up customer service and say, yeah, I'm coming down there. I signed up, but I'm not agreeing with everything on your waiver here.
Well, it's kind of like, what is the law in the state that is involved? Because there are some states that are very, very tight about that. If you sign something, you're deemed to have read it, and you're bound by it.
Yes.
And that is something you have to overcome. These waivers now, for a good reason, have become public. This is making a wave across the country. And, there are organizations in literally every state in the United States, what are called associations for justice. Like, for example, in Maryland, it's the Maryland Association for Justice. It used to be the Plaintiffs' Bar, or the Plaintiffs' Trial Bar. And literally every state has one. And everybody is being made aware of this episode and being able to take it and use it to introduce legislation to get these waivers off the books. We're living in a society where there is responsibility for what you do or what you don't do. And that's why it should clearly be something that should be stricken off the books.
Is what I'm hearing from you is there's really no way to circumvent them, because they're in your face. And if you want to move on to the next step online, you have to say, I read and agree. Sounds like the answer is getting rid of them or cleaning them up to a great degree.
Correct. Making every effort you can to talk to the people about it, and just raise the Disney case as an example.
Yeah.
This person was a physician. It's just a terrible, terrible tragedy that this ever occurred. And it was totally preventable.
And especially because many of us go to Disney because it's family friendly and you feel that they have your back, so to speak. And especially in
Sure.
this situation. And they do make accommodations for people with handicaps and all of that. So one would assume that when you say, are you sure there's no nuts or dairy in this? And they say, yes, we're good, that they've been doing this for a while. We'll see how this plays out. Paul, how do we find you? How do we learn more about your firm if somebody's got some challenges with litigation or even waivers?
Well, it's Paul Bekman, Bekman. My law firm is in Baltimore, Maryland. We're in the world of Google. You can Google and find out everything you want about me, my firm, what I've done. Google Paul Bekman, attorney at law, Baltimore, Maryland. You'll find out all about me.
Always great talking with you. Learn so much. I love the fact that you're so plugged in. This is a trending story that people are talking about, and we had a chance to dissect it a little bit today. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Steve. Appreciate it. You.
Thank you. We'll be right back.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house.
And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned. This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.